Welcome back. Let's talk more about Germany, because after all, that is the country people are looking to save the European project. But is Germany even in the position to? Well, let's see more with Nigel Farage. I do want to touch on Germany. You talked about Germany's role. Obviously, all eyes are on the core to try to solve this and bridge these gaps. But Germany is not immune to the problems of the Eurozone, not at all. And just today, we had new unemployment numbers out that indicate the number of people out of work in Germany is creeping up. Interestingly, I thought a poll suggests Germans are more concerned about unemployment than inflation. And we know that country's history with inflation. So do you think this puts more political pressure on Merkel to make concessions on something like Eurobonds, which she has been firmly against? Or does this make Germany more likely to say, hey, you know, we cannot keep shouldering the burden of this crisis?
I'd be cautious about an opinion poll that shows right now Germans are more concerned about unemployment than inflation, because actually inflation is not seen by people to be a threat at the moment. Indeed, in many parts of the EU, deflation is the problem, not inflation. So I'd be a bit cautious about reading too much into that one particular opinion poll. I mean, look, what is clear is that for your average German worker, you know, the man or woman that is paying a mortgage, that is bringing up children, that is being very law-abiding and very German in the way in which they are, they've just spent 20 years paying for the reintegration of Eastern Germany back into Western Germany since the fall of the Berlin Wall. They've paid a huge cost to do that, but they haven't resented doing it because ultimately they were all Germanic people. Now, when you say to a country that's just picked up a huge 20-year bill, could you please pick up a bill for Greece, Portugal, Ireland, Spain, and possibly even Italy? Oh, and by the way, your commitment to this is indefinite. Is it any wonder that ordinary German folk are saying, we just want no part of this? And I think what's really interesting is there is a reawakening in Germany of a sense of German identity. You know, you've got to remember that history hangs very heavily over the German people. Their sense of guilt for what happened in World War II has dominated that country's international relations ever since 1945. But there is a younger generation growing up who do not feel the guilt in quite the same way that their parents or grandparents did. And they are saying, we want to be a modern democratic country that's nice to people. We're happy to be cooperative across Europe, but we are not going to be the mugs of this game. We are not going to go on bailing out failing southern European countries who, frankly, should never have joined this Eurozone in the first place. And Angela Merkel, who is no fool and who is a very astute politician, knows that. If she says yes, if she blinks and gives in to Eurobonds, she will lose the election next year. And I believe that Angela Merkel will not blink. I don't think there's any chance of the Germans, Dutch or Finns, accepting the European Union becoming a debt union. And what that means is that in the end, whatever Van Rompuy or Barroso propose is frankly irrelevant. There is not going to be agreement, and we are headed, perhaps sooner rather than later, towards a breakup of the Eurozone, in my opinion. Okay, and that's also a really important point I think you made about the different generations. It's something that isn't always top of mind for people, definitely plays an important part, as you point out. I know you weren't on board with that poll, you were cautious about it, but one point I do want to bring up about it, the Financial Times reported on it. It showed that if there were a referendum on the euro, on membership to the euro in Germany today, 43% would vote to keep it, while 41%, very close, would favor a return to the Deutschmark. And similarly, a very small majority would vote to stay in the EU, while 28% would vote to leave and 51% would vote to stay. Is that a piece of evidence, though, that supports something that you've been saying all along, and in this interview, that support for the Eurozone is fracturing, even at the core where this support is most required? Yeah, I mean, look, in a sense, the euro is the embodiment of the whole European project. The criticisms that people like me have had for the euro actually are the same arguments as the bigger criticisms of the attempt without the consent of the peoples of Europe, to form a new state with a new flag and a new anthem and a new police force and a new army and Herman Van Rompuy at the top of it. And I think what those figures show you is that right across the European continent, from north to south to east to west, regardless what our political class say, the peoples of Europe are saying, no, we don't want this. We don't want centralised bureaucratic control. We don't want our democracies and our birthright to be stripped away. We don't want to be run by these people who mostly are domestic political failures. We actually are rather proud of who we are. And what's wrong, for goodness sake, with having a Europe of diverse, different countries, proud of who they are, but sitting around a table agreeing to cooperate. You know, we can cooperate on cross-border crime. We can cooperate on the environment. We can have reciprocal deals on, you know, people from Britain working in Paris and vice versa. We can do all of this without the European Commission, without the European Parliament, without the European Court, without the massive cost and bureaucracy. And I am not, you know, I am not anti-European. Please don't think that. You know, I'm married to a German. I've worked for French companies. I love Europe. I love the cultural diversity of Europe. But what I'm fighting against, and where I'm finding support is growing, I don't want to live in a Europe of bureaucracy. I want to live in a Europe of democracy.
Ah, well said. Real quick before we go, in May, addressing European Parliament, you said you feared this project could cause the rise of National Socialism in Europe. Now, after 2 rounds of Greek elections, we have neo-Nazis in Parliament. How much worse do you fear this could get politically in terms of fracturing and the division into extreme politics?
If you take away from people their right to determine their own futures, to live under their own rules, to take away from them their nationality, then you risk doing something that we stupidly did back in 1920 with Yugoslavia, where we took diverse, different Balkan states, we forced them together against their will, under a new identity, and you and I both know, since 1990, of the awful things that have happened as those countries have fought to get back their independence, self-determination, democracy and freedom. We mustn't allow the European Union to make those same mistakes.